Hi! In a previous video, we looked at some of the key features of this UNI-T MSO2304X 300 MHz bandwidth, 5 GB samples per second sampling rate, mixed signal oscilloscope. It has a lot of fantastic features. If you have not got a chance to watch that video yet, I'd recommend you checking that one out first. In today's video, we're going to open it up and take a look inside. Let's go! And you can see that all the screws here are those hex screws, so let's remove those first. Alright, there are quite a few screws, and I think I have removed them all. Of course, we have this warranty void, if broken sticker, and we'll have to void it. Of course, that's what we do on this channel. So let's do that. Let's see if we can open it. And it looks like it may still be some other... I'm not sure actually. Yep, as it turned out, all the screws have been removed, and I just need to give it a wiggle, and you can see that it should open right up. Looks like we have to remove this metal cover. Alright, we just got in. Actually, before I continue, I wanted to test out the fan here because during our testing, you heard that the fan noise was a little bit loud. I wonder if it's this fan or the fan in the back. I think it might be the fan on the chip here. So let me actually connect it back and power it down briefly and take a look. So you need to be careful. So let me lift the unit a little bit, making sure nothing is shorted, and let's power it on. And you can hear, indeed, unfortunately, that was the fan. It's this tiny little fan here. And the fan in the back is actually very quiet. You can hear right now it's on. So let me power it off. Well, if the fan noise is really bothering you, I suppose you could always swap in an aftermarket fan. Maybe later I will do some adjustment to these tightening screws, as I suspect that probably has something to do with the noise as well. But for now, let's disassemble it a little bit further, and we can see everything better. Alright, after quite a bit of work, I have essentially disassembled the entire oscilloscope. I had to do that off camera as it was quite elaborate. Originally, I thought it would be fairly easy to remove the mainboard. But as it turned out, I pretty much had to remove everything in order to free the mainboard. Even without removing the mainboard, we could pretty much see everything after the shielding cans were removed. The only reason I had to free the mainboard from the case is that I wanted to remove the heatsinks on these chips, because I wanted to see what UNI-T is using. Anyway, it's definitely worth a while. I do teardowns like this on channel so we can all take a look at what's inside. Not everyone is willing to disassemble their new toy. And by the way, I will upload some of the teardown pictures to my website, and feel free to hop over after watching this video so you can examine at your own pace. It will definitely take me a while to put everything back together afterwards, but we'll worry about that later. Alright, I think I'll start with the FPGA and work our way around the board. The main FPGA used here is this Xilinx Kintex-7 XC7K325T. Now this is the one sitting under that heatsink with a fan. It is a rather beefy FPGA. It has around 330,000 logic cells, and it's quite pricey. Just by casually searching the internet, the unit price is well above $1,000 a piece, even in large quantities. And later on you will see that inside this scope, UNI-T had used a lot of expensive parts. So given that, pricing the MSO2304X at just about $2,000 is actually quite reasonable. The FPGA here is obviously responsible for the processing of the captured waveforms, doing mathematics operations, and filtering, so on and so forth. Given how expensive this part is, I would have given it a quieter fan, even if it cost a few dollars more, if I were making the purchasing decision. I guess I still can't believe how loud that chip cooling fan is. Oh, and by the way, these memory chips here, these would be for our simple memory. Up here we have 4 of these ADC chips. These are ADC08D 108-bit ADCs. Let me move it down so we can see them in the center here. These, by the way, are also very expensive chips. They are over $250 a piece, even in large quantities. Clearly, UNI-T can source these parts much cheaper, as the entire scope is only just slightly above $2,000. If you take a look at the specifications of the ADC08D100, you will see that these are actually dual-channel 8-bit ADCs. Each channel is capable of sampling at up to 1.3 gigasamples per second. It can also be configured as a single-channel ADC, and that is done by interleaving the sampling. With that, you can of course achieve up to 2.6 gigasamples per second. Remember, the specification indicates that the sampling rate is at 5 gigasamples per second for this oscilloscope. So clearly that cannot be achieved with a single ADC chip, even with two ADCs working together, as that's a maximum sampling rate of 2.6 gigasamples per second. So clearly they're using two of these AD08D100s to achieve that 5 gigasamples per second maximum sampling rate. So basically, UNI-T achieved this 5 gigasamples per second sampling rate using 4 independent ADCs interleaving together, and each of the ADCs is just sampling at 1.25 gigasamples per second. This implementation is actually quite complicated, as the more common approach is just simply interleaving with 2 ADCs instead of 4. Obviously, this requires very precise alignment of the interleaved samples, so the clock has to be very stable. Otherwise, you will get all sorts of artifacts when reconstructing the waveform with these samples from different ADCs. From our test in the previous video, we suspected that UNI-T is sharing the ADCs between 2 channels. And if you remember when we were using channel 1 to observe the signal, when we turn on channel 2, you could see that the signal quality dropped. And that became obvious at high frequencies. And that's a very clear indication channel 1 and channel 2 are sharing an ADC. And of course, channel 3 and channel 4 are sharing another ADC. And you can kind of see it here as well. On the board, although we have 4 of these ADC chips, it looks like you would have one ADC chip corresponding to a single channel, but as I mentioned earlier, actually the reality is that each ADC chip is only capable of handling half of the bandwidth, and 2 chips working together, or 4 ADCs, are used to achieve that 5 gigasamples per second sampling rate, and they are shared between 2 channels. So channel 1 and 2 use these 2 ADCs, and channel 3 and 4 use these 2 ADCs. So if you want to use the full 5 gigasamples per second sampling rate for 2 channels, let's say, then you will have to choose one channel from channel 1 and channel 2, and another channel from channel 3 and channel 4. Between these ADCs, this chip is marked as 7044, which I think is an HMC 7044, that is a clock synthesizer to generate the clocks used for these ADCs. And now let me move down the board a little bit further so we can see the input sections. I had already removed the shielding cans. You can see here one of these shielding cans is covering 2 channels. If you look at the circuitry of the 4 channels, they're pretty much identical except for a few chips here and there. Now on channel 1 you can see we have this extra chip here, and that's a shift register 595, and channel 2 does not have that. On channel 3 we'll have 2 more chips. This one is 595. This one is marked as X78C. I'm not sure what that chip is, but it doesn't have that on channel 4. Let me zoom into one of the channels and we'll take a closer look. You can see that each channel has this 49.9 ohm resistor, and that is for the 50 ohm input impedance selection. You can also see a couple of solid-state relays for switching the input signals, and these mechanical relays for range switching. Each channel has 2 of these trimmer caps for calibrating the frequency response, and also you have a trim pot here as well. To achieve the 500 MHz input bandwidth, UNI-T used an LMH6518, which is a 900 MHz digitally controlled variable gain amplifier. It has very fast rise time of less than 500 picoseconds. It also employs a high-speed op-amp, the BUF802. It has a gain bandwidth of 3.1 GHz. So as you can see, the hardware in the digital oscilloscope portion is actually quite impressive. As they say, no expense is spared. Next to the oscilloscope input channels are the 2 arbitrary waveform generator output channels. Let's move it here so we can see that. These 2 arbitrary waveform output channels are also under a shielding can, and there's actually not a whole lot underneath here. These relays obviously are used to switch the output amplitudes, and we also have these resistors here, and you can see that is a 49.9 ohm resistor, and that is because the output impedance for each channel can also be configured as either 1 megohm or 50 ohm. Zooming out, you can see that the arbitrary waveform generator section is handled by this Spartan 6 XC6S LX16 FPGA. Again, it is a very capable FPGA. Also, it is very expensive. The output digital to analog converter used is this ADC9122. It's a dual-channel 16-bit DAC, which is responsible for driving the 2 independent output channels. Again, the DAC is not cheap either. The other chip under the heatsink is a Rockchip 3568, which is a chip right here. It is a quad-core ARM Cortex-A55 processor with floating-point processing unit. It is used as the application processor in this oscilloscope. It supports Ethernet and USB peripherals and can drive displays as well. This chip is also quite powerful, and you can clearly see that from the responsiveness of the UI. Now, these are the DRAMs for the CPU. Between the main FPGA and the application CPU, we have a couple of these ADP-5414s. Each of these is a quad-channel low-noise buck regulator, and they are used to generate the various voltage rails needed by the FPGA and perhaps even the CPU. Let's see what else we can see around the CPU here. And the chip down here, that is the flash memory. I think it's a 32GB eMMC. Let's move down. Oh, and by the way, because this oscilloscope also has 16 digital channels, we also have 8 of these. Now we have 4 on the top, another 4 at the bottom, but 8 of these ADCMP562 high-speed dual comparators. These are PECL comparators, or positive emitter coupled logic comparators. The logic analyzer is capable of sampling at 1.25 gig samples per second and can detect a minimum pulse width of just 800 picoseconds. And these comparators are certainly up to the task. And this is our power input. It's actually just a single 12 volts input. Here is our display connector, you can see here, and this is for the touch screen. And let me move down a little bit more. And here we have a GL3523, that is a USB 3.1 controller chip, and on board we do have USB capability. The chip down here, that's a RK809 from Rockchip, and that's a power management chip. It has multiple channels of buck converters and also has a couple of linear regulator channels as well. And let me move it to the side here. On this side here, you can see we have quite a few of these JTAG programming headers for various chips on board. There is also a serial port on the first row here as well. Keep in mind that this is a multi-layer board, so a lot of the traces actually go through the middle layers. Although the headers are here, they're responsible for the chips across the board here. I'm not exactly sure how many layers this PCB has, but given the circuit complexity and also the high pin counts of the FPGAs used, it is at least a 6-layer board, and I wouldn't be surprised if the number actually is higher. You see that we have a missing component here. This is actually reserved for the wireless module. Now, wireless is supported in the MSO2304X series, but not in the MSO2304X series we have here. But if you look at the PCB marking, actually let me just show you here, you can see that the PCB marking here is MSO3000X/MSO2000X. So I assume both models are using the exact same PCB, perhaps with minor changes. I will be very curious to see, besides the wireless module, what else is different. And that will be in another video coming up soon. Alright, let's move back here. So on top here you can see we have this battery, and that's for the real-time clock. We also have another microcontroller here, some DC-DC converter circuitry, and more DC-DC converter circuitry here. And here is our Ethernet, that's the chip responsible for Ethernet. And that's pretty much everything on this side of the board. The layout is very clean and very logical. Now let me flip it over and take a look at the other side. And this is pretty much what I expected. There is not too much going on at the bottom here. And here are the 4 additional ADCMP562 comparators. As I mentioned earlier, these are for the digital input channels. Altogether, there are 8 of them. And by the look of it, each input channel also has an additional solid-state relay at the bottom here as well. If you look at it here, let me actually zoom in a little bit more so you can see closer. Here we have a TCXO, a temperature compensated oscillator, and that is used to generate a stable clock reference. And besides that, there is not a whole lot. We have some filtering caps and a lot of these decoupling caps. They are centered around the footprint of the main FPGA and also the CPU as well here. Overall, the main board is well designed and neatly assembled, and this is definitely high quality stuff. And here is the encoder board that I removed earlier. This is one for the front panel, and it's actually sitting underneath another board. This board is for the keypad. You can see that these two are mated together via the headers on the board here. And this board connects to the main board via the 3-pin cable. So the design is actually very neat. You can see this is how it's assembled together. And here is the main tray after the main PCB has been removed. You can see It's very high quality, and there's no sharp edges. Everything is very well thought out. And here's a look at the back of the case. That's the main power supply. By the way, the power supply is actually under the shielding can. I just removed it so you can see the power supply itself. From this angle, you can see that the power supply itself is actually pretty simple. There's probably some circuitry underneath, but I'm not going to bother taking it off. And the build quality is definitely pretty high here. And here is the main case fan. That fan is actually pretty quiet. The fan that is not quiet is the one on top of the heatsink of the FPGA, that 40mm fan, and that is rather unfortunate. And just out of curiosity, I had removed that fan from the heatsink. You can see that that's a rather generic fan, unfortunately. And I'm sure if you replace this with a quieter fan, the overall experience would be much better. Underneath here, that's our LCD panel. I'm not going to open it up as it's just a panel. But here is our flat flex for the LCD, and also here is for the touchscreen, as you can see here. And here is a close-up of the connectors. You can see it a little bit better. And by the way, the touchscreen actually has some kind of coating on top, makes it very smooth. It's very pleasant to use. Now, of course, I'll have to put everything back together. I'm going to do that off camera, so I don't have to bore you with that. Anyway, the MSO2304X series seems to be very well engineered. The build quality is definitely excellent, and all components used are top quality ones. The way all these boards are put together is well thought out. Overall, very impressive. Hats off to UNI-T's design engineers. I hope you enjoyed this teardown video and learned something new. If you liked the video, please remember to give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. It is your participation that makes videos like this possible. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.